this afternoon? Are you feeling sleepy after lunch? Oh, man. Well, just to give you a heads up, I'm probably going to be a little bit more interactive. So asking questions. I might even open it up for responses. So just heads up, I'm not going to let you be sleepy. If you don't know already, we're going to be talking about supporting end users in a transparent manner through DDM updates, compliance, self-service, and some more features that we wanted to highlight. By a show of hands, how many of you have heard of Addigy? Man, for those who have their hands down, I'm hurt. No, but just because there's a few folks in here that don't know, what Addigy does, we specialize in Apple device management. So we're primarily going to highlight our product, but generally speaking, you can apply a lot of these concepts to other MDM providers. And so before we get started, we should probably introduce ourselves, I guess. So my name is Michaela, and I'm a product manager at Addigy. And I'm also joined with my colleague, Bryce, who's a senior product manager.
I'm just a product manager. But yeah.
So humble. And we actually came all the way from, at least for myself, I came from Salt Lake City, and he came from Wisconsin.
Wisconsin. We got to say it with an accent.
Oh, see, I don't have that accent. So our agenda is going to be a little bit different. We're going to pretty much break it out into two different sections. You're going to notice proactive steps that you can take in your MDM solution, and you will also see reactive steps that you can take to provide your end user with a transparent experience. So why does transparency matter? It's crucial. At the end of the day, it builds trust between you and your end user. It helps reduce support requests, and I think we all like that. At least I'd hope so. And then users also feel more in control, and they also feel more confident. So at least, we should be thinking about how to empower them and not be so scared of these devices. So now I'm going to hand it off to Bryce to talk about OS updates.
Everybody's favorite topic, which it's like a beat, which is going to continue beating the same horse, OS updates, because no one wants to talk about OS updates. This is everybody's least favorite topic. But it's really important to get it right because that user experience is something that can annoy them. It's something that annoys you, takes time out of your day, and the end user's day. So I'm going to break it down into two components. First one's going to be super quick because it's very, very simple. There's not much nuance to it. It just goes and does it, which would be doing the updates in Setup Assistant so the device is up to date before the device enrolls. It's just a value that's being passed to it. Then we'll get into more of the actual meat and potatoes of DDM and MDM updates, everything that happens after Setup Assistant and beyond, how that functions, and how you can make sure that you're giving the end user the best experience and you are getting the information that you need to remediate it when needed. So in Setup Assistant, you're going to have a value. Any MDM can pass this. This is how it looks like in our payload for the ADE settings. You're saying, hey, I want a OS update to go out for this targeted version within this pre-stage enrollment, this ADE enrollment, however it's phrased. And in this case, we're saying I want to put iOS 17.4.1 down. I made the slide before 17.5 existed. And I put it on the side here because it fits nicely. Mac OS does a very similar process where basically it's going to prompt the user right when they're hitting that network at that first enrollment. And it's going to say, hey, before you do the remote management installation, you got to do an update. It's going to go ahead, pull that down, and install that update. So that gets the device in that enrolled state well before it ever touches anything. So if you're looking at security and compliance benchmarks like we're going to look at in just a moment, you're having that device, in theory, assuming that maybe your main point is OS version, compliant before it even ever enrolls into your MDM and hits that management server. So that's one thing. Let's move into a little bit more difficult or nuanced and the different layers of DDM and MDM updates. One thing I want to recap real quick, and I know it's a big chart and I like very loud graphics for some reason, I don't know why, but bottom line is DDM updates for the OS are macOS 14 and up, iOS 17 and up, and iPadOS 17 and up. That is all that is currently passed through. We'll see what a couple weeks from now in June holds. But those are passed through the declaration in declarative device management. Your MDM updates for things like Safari, XProtect, or your VPP Apple apps, that's all still MDM. And then, of course, I have the no emoji guy for there's no Safari or XProtect or definitions updates for iOS, iPadOS. So we're going to focus in now on what does that look like to the end user. If you're using MDM updates, I'm sure everybody either has nightmares or has seen this before, or they love it. Within MDM updates, you're going to have a couple different installation methods. There's one that's going to be the default, which is going to give the user a 60-second countdown from when that install command is reached the device and the device is ready to go ahead and that update's prepared and downloaded. There's also the deferment, where you can have a numeric value passed within the MDM protocol. It's going to give you the option to say install, later, remind me tomorrow, etc. A couple different things you can do around that. DDM is a little bit different. And I know Apple kind of talked about this on the session yesterday morning, and there's going to be a little bit of review from some of that, but we're going to go a little bit deeper. Basically, you're passing a date and time that update's going to go and install by. So in this example, it's saying I'm going to go do 14.1 at this date and time. iPadOS, pretty much the same thing. It's going to get a pop-up. It's going to say, hey, we have this update to go and install. You click on it. It's going to bring you to system settings, just like it would on macOS. It's going to go ahead, prepare that update, download it, install it. As far as the end user knows, it's exactly the same as they would get on any of their personal devices. Same thing for iOS, just scaled down, a little bit different. One thing of note in iOS, though, is there is a slight difference in the very final countdown. The emergency call function is available on iOS, so you, in theory, if you really wanted to, you could continue hitting that, going to the dialer screen, backing out of the dialer and going back in, and the update won't go. Eventually, though, the end user is going to miss that timeout window. It's going to go through. They'll get the update. On macOS, when that update is downloaded and prepared, they'll see that there in Setup Assistant. It's going to go through, preparing it. They'll get a 60-second countdown, just like you'd get when you do any other update that is going to say, hey, the update's ready to roll. It's going to go and say it's past due, install it, and go. How is it getting it, though? And this is the actual declaration that's being pushed down to the devices. We're saying, okay, go do this version and this build at this date and time. And that's going to be in the local machine time. Now, we'll get into some of the scheduling and the cron jobs and stuff that we have on the back end of that, but the bottom line is what's being passed to the device is in device time, and that's when it's going to enforce that. I know Apple also showed this, but one thing that bears repeating is that notification that end user is going to get of, hey, you have an update. This is one of the, to me, this is the big point with declarative, but also some of the logging that we'll get into in just a little bit is it's going to say, hey, if you set it for 30 days from now, you're going to get a prompt. Okay, half of that again, 14 days, you're going to get a prompt. You get into 24 hours, it's going to start ignoring do not disturb, and it's going to start prompting more and more and more and more. But then you might say, well, what happens if the device was in a drawer or in a bag and they were on holiday and they came back and they booted it up and it's after that? Well, what's going to happen is, does it say, okay, I missed the date. Is it ready to go? Okay, cool. Give them a 60-minute warning. We're going to go into that countdown then after that and start doing that update. Is it not ready? Okay, well, go download it. Get that ready. So as far as the end user is concerned, they're just going to get that prompt and it's going to go through just like it would on their personal device when they're ready to go for that update. And when they hit that 60-minute window, it is quite forceful, and it's going to go. There is really no way to back that off. The only thing would be to remove the declaration. I've had a few customers that I've worked with where they've had a scenario where a device was off like that. they have an important user that gets that, and they don't want to have that take place, they need to remove it, they got a board meeting, etc., you can remove that declaration. But once you get to the 10-minute countdown, I've had varying results of when you remove that declaration of if it actually truly stops that countdown device side. So really, you're best to act and remove that declaration as soon as possible if that's the case from that device. So that's what the user sees. That's what's going on in the back end. How do you schedule it? So again, this is within the Addigy UI, but however your MDM is scheduling it, there's a number of different ways you can do it. But bottom line is we have two settings, just like many other MDMs I have as well. You can set a maximum version. You want to not push a command past that point. That does not mean that the device can't go and do that update. It could if the end user has admin rights and you're not hiding it, like we'll get to in a few slides. The next option, which is the most popular, I'd say at least 60% of the customers I work with are using it. They're saying, I want the latest, and I want it pretty much as soon as possible. And we'll get into some of the scheduling. And then underneath that, you'll see there's other options for the DDM updates themselves. You can have it push beta OSs, which, one thing of note, there is no beta OS catalog from Apple because you need to sign those terms and conditions to be part of the beta. It's actually populated in our scenario from when the device does an audit, or if you're a Jamf customer, a recon. So if a device has the beta profile installed and is in part of that program and it sees macOS 14.6 build 1 or beta 1, it's going to go and say, okay, hey, at my audit, which takes place every 5 minutes, I've got an update here. Put that in the catalog for future use if you need to send one, or if I'm being told the state of the latest or a specific version. And that would then be used in the future, just like the line up top where that has the build and the version that's being populated from that catalog from Apple. Then underneath it, there's RSR. You could have a different value set for that. And then there's also the update schedule, which is the most important component of that. In this scenario here, I'm saying Monday through Friday, go ahead and do that update. And there's also an avoid declaration, which I'll get into in an example in just a little bit. Let's say you want these updates to go out as fast as physically possible. How do you make that happen? Well, let's say that the macOS 14.5 GA'd at 4 UTC, and that's the update general availability. At about 4:01, we all know it takes a little bit of time for the CDN to get that populated from Apple. Let's say about 4:01, shortly thereafter, that catalog is populated. Those devices can see it. We can see the catalog from Apple. We're ready to go on our end. Then, at the top of every hour, we have a cron job that's going. So at 5 UTC, we're going to take that scheduled job. We're going to go say, okay, let's update the catalog. Is that catalog updated? Yes, great. 14.5 is the latest version. Let's put that and get those commands ready. Those commands will get sent out. And then let's say we set that value to install it 0 days after it ships and immediately at midnight, which is already taken place in this scenario. Mathematically, then it's going to say, all right, at 6 UTC, we're going to go and install those updates on that device. So plus or minus a few minutes of when that declaration comes down, 6:03, 6:04, whenever it hits, that's going to be, okay, we got it at 5 o'clock or so. That command came down. Boom, let's go and install it. In the case of the scheduler, where we have a blockout period, we could have, let's say we want to do updates Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. We want to avoid those declarations because there's a bank holiday on Monday, and I'm going to be gone all week, and I don't want to deal with updates. So we're going to say don't do any updates if they ship between now and that Friday, which means our next target local date time that's being scheduled by that job would be the 3rd on that following Monday then. So that takes care of our updates as what the user is going to be prompted with. How does it work on the back end? How are we going to schedule it? What do we do when it goes wrong? Updates aren't infallible. They're going to fail. And that end user experience isn't very great. It's not very transparent. They just know, well, it couldn't be installed. What do I do then? So you need the data to understand why is that. And that's where declarative device management and the updates process is so much better than MDM. So these are actually examples from our production instance of what we've gotten from feedback on devices, because we can actually get that logging in that full response message from the device as that status takes place. Some of this is redacted because it's pointing to specific endpoints, but basically we're saying, okay, we tried to go push 14.4 to that device we had that screenshot from previously, and the update was prepared, but it didn't quite finish. Why is that? Well, in this case, it's because the internet connection was offline. So in this scenario then, that device will hit that 60-minute window, it's going to try again. But in the meantime, that device, we know why it failed. We can go in there and look at that. Another one that has been a common point of feedback in the Apple seed rooms, let's say you're getting this prompt. This is actually from our CEO's machine, because he messaged everybody like, hey, what's this? And it's an Apple feedback ticket, which is always a fun response. But what happened here is, and what we've been seeing, and it seemed to be for 14.2, 14.1, 14.3, and 14.4 varying. We didn't see it for 14.4.1 really, and it's only been maybe a handful of devices within our org or within customers, but we'll get a prompt where we'll say, it needs those admin credentials. And so it's saying, hey, can I go and install this update? Give me these credentials. Most end users, whatever, they're going to close it, they're going to move on, they're not going to give those credentials, because what it's essentially looking for is this secure token session that it can use to go and do the passwordless reboot and go through and do that. What does that feedback look like? Well, it's basically going to say that there was a user interaction required. And so it's going to say, okay, great. In 14.4.1, I meant we're not seeing it from 14.4.0 to 14.4.1. Once we're on 14.4.1 to 14.4 or 14.5, too many numbers. But you're going to see a pop-up that's going to say, okay, yep, for this device, we had a user interaction required. They didn't give anything back, and so it couldn't go through and do that. Okay, well, that's great. That gets you everything that you need to know to help the user on a case-by-case basis, but you're not going to go in there unless you get a report. How could you know outside of that? So we can extrapolate that out into the policy status and how it's being deployed. So we can say, here's all of our updates that have completed on these devices. Green means good, yellow means it failed. What does it look like? One thing I'd point out, if we drill down in this, we can see up here these different devices. These are ones that I actually manage personally. Those have gone through and done that update. MDM updates, where we had some more of those failures, it's going to show up, and you could drill down into those devices. When we get to the point, if we have more failures in declarative, we could also drill down in here and see that same information that we just had in that per device view. So in summary, why you should be using DDM, I know it's not a tough sell, but it's that the new functionality for prompting the end user is the huge point to me. But the other more important point that I look at as a former support person, first as an MDM customer, then as an MDM vendor, and then now here, is getting that feedback from the device and why it failed is critically important, because that's how we help Apple make it better in submitting those feedbacks and knowing, okay, we can go get logs from this device. We know kind of when it failed from the end user. Let's pinpoint that in the logging then, and that helps to filter through all the logging and the mess that we have with it. And then those details of the installation state too also will give you an idea of how long is it taking for it to come down. Can you have any messaging around that within what you're telling users when, hey, we're going to push an update out, this is going to be the date and time. You can kind of keep an eye on it then. And then last point there would be that the DDM updates can coexist peacefully with MDM updates, because they have to. That's how the Safari and XProtect stuff comes down. However, DDM will take precedence. If for some reason you sent an MDM command, the DDM command is going to take precedence, and that would be pushed for the OS update first. So what if you don't want updates to be right away, and you maybe don't want to be transparent to the user and what updates are available? It's a little bit of an oxymoron given what we're talking about, but given the presentation yesterday about test plans, which I loved, about OS updates and making sure that you have your stuff tested, how can you defer that? Well, there's two routes on macOS. You could use the deferrals profile, which is a 1 to 90 day. That's the maximum value to stop the installation of a macOS 14 version or what have you. It could be any version that the profile supports. We'll just talk about 14 in this example. The default value is 30, and it's going to also suppress it in system settings, so those end users won't see that there to go and do that. There's also the full installer blocker. If they are smart enough to go to the App Store, pull that down, or go use the software update daemon binary to go and pull the full installer if they have admin rights, they would not be able to run that process then. And I know Jamf has something very similar to that as well. It's just doing a process kill on that. iOS and iPadOS, you only have the one option. Same thing with the deferrals profile. Here's what it looks like. Looks like that in most any MDM. It's just a value you're passing for those things. And here's a QR code if you're interested in the KB articles for it. I'll leave it on screen for a second before I move on there. But bottom line that I always say whenever I'm talking with customers when updates is, test them early, test them often. The values that I've seen for where we're talking about that scheduler is we're saying, 7 to 14 days is commonly what I see, and we'll say, yep, that's great, get it tested in between then, get the beta OS update profile, be part of the Apple Seed for IT program, and get that tested. So you've got your systems updated. Your next step is to put those security controls in place then. So you need to know what your full picture for compliance is. Compliance can mean many different things. Maybe you're saying that compliance is just having those OSs up to date. Maybe it's having other benchmarks. Maybe you want to deploy those remediations now on those devices, and then any net new ones that you put in there, and then have an audit that takes place against that benchmark so you know where you're at with it. We have a number of benchmarks. I know there's a few other benchmarks that you can run via script out there, but basically you can take either of them that are out of the box that we have and clone them and customize them to what you want, or you can layer in whatever you want with that or just make your own custom one. CIS and NIST are both in the platform there. Check a box, turn it on, and possibly more importantly, if you have some custom facts or inventory items that you want to have that go against, you could say, I want to do these specific rules within a benchmark or pull it from the community, or go make your own by saying, I want this version to meet this requirement, or maybe for Cyber Essentials, I want this device to have this profile on it. Does that meet it? Within the UI then, you'll be able to see that per device, and you can then see what the breakdown of those rules. But now I'm going to hand it over to Michaela to talk more about self-service and how it pulls all that data in.
All right. The fun features now. I'm just kidding. Sorry, Bryce.
That's fine.
Before I get started, by a show of hands, how many of you have already adopted DDM? Man. Bryce, take note of the people that haven't so we can interrogate them after. But without further ado, self-service. So this is our self-service application in Addigy. You can actually see that we support macOS, iPadOS, and iOS. So for those of you that don't know what self-service is or haven't looked into it, or maybe you don't really think that there's a big purpose there, generally speaking, self-service is designed to empower your end user, to give them the supplies and the tools that they need when they need them without having to wait on their IT department. And so isn't that valuable already right there? Less, downtime, less support tickets, as we mentioned earlier. So overall, you can curate a library of apps and tools. And then, you can also start educating your end users as to what, where to go. We also have white labeling features, so you can actually change your logo. Oh man, okay. Well, you can change your name and logo, and it's fully customizable. That way you can brand it to your company. Now, I want to dive into some specific features of self-service. So, as Bryce was talking about earlier with those compliance benchmarks, one of the things that we wanted to offer was actually showing it on the end user side. So this is an active view in our production instance that shows everything that it's checking, remediating, and if you're compliant or not. And so what this does is it allows the end users to see, oh, okay, hey, they're security focused. Also, is my device okay? So it gives that reassurance as well. And also for MSPs, this is a great way to show the value that you are providing your end users. Huge, huge piece. I know we always talk about reporting, but this is one way that you can show your end users that. Another feature to highlight here is ticketing. Addigy supports integrations with various platforms like Zendesk, Freshdesk, etc., where you can connect it up with your Addigy instance, and your end user can go to one place, not only get the tools that they need, not only run MDM profiles if that's, printers, etc., not only run scripts if you have stuff automated, but they can also submit a request. And so this is a more reactive approach to transparency with your end user, but it's also pointing them to one location. That's also less that you need to do to educate your end user. Now, there's obviously a lot of other features with self-service, but these were the main ones that I felt like pertained so much to the end user transparency. And if you have questions later, we can always dive into it more. But another feature we wanted to highlight, which is very popular, is home screen layout. So by show of hands, how many need to manage iOS or iPadOS devices? Okay, a decent amount. So with Addigy, we wanted to provide another visual experience, not only supply and transparent, end user experience, but also to provide a transparent experience with the admin using Addigy. So to the right of the screen, you can see a whole library of applications that's pulling from your VPP token, and also all of the web clips that are within the policy. And so you can go ahead and sort it. Just to give an example here, you can see, certain applications we've selected from the side, and then if we wanted to create a folder, we could even take an extra step here, create the folder, select the applications from the side, group them together, and then, so if you really wanted to as well, you can add or delete pages. Now, another feature that, if you feel like you're constantly needing to call your clients or email them back and forth, this feature might be for you. So this is our chat feature in Addigy, where you can go into the individual device, you can select the user that you want to chat with, and you can start a chat with them, and it prompts the user right away, as long as it's online and turned on. And obviously you can see in this example, the device is online. And you can message them about maybe they reported a ticket, maybe they requested software, maybe they're having an issue with something, maybe a hardware failure was detected. And so that's just a few examples as to how you can use this chat feature. And here's an example as to what it looks like on the end user side. So you can actually see my name, the admin, right there. Michaela, if you guys already forgot. And then you is your end user. So they can reply right here, and you will get it immediately. Well, I shouldn't say immediately, technically speaking. But you will get it pretty quickly on the Addigy portal side. And then the last feature I want to highlight that is very flexible, that you can really embellish that end user experience, is prompts. Prompts bring awareness, responsibility, and also just it's a reminder. So some examples of this could be maybe there's new training materials you need them to look at. Maybe there was like updates to like within your organization that you want to communicate. Or if there's like software that's being deprecated, that's a perfect example of that. And then also if there's any like upcoming events, there's so many different use cases that you can use with prompting. And there's no limits behind it. It's all on how much you actually adopt it. So overall, I know we talked about a lot of features, but just to kind of recap, we went over MDM updates. We went over DDM and the importance of that and how it not only supplies us with more information, but it also kind of forces the end user to, update their device. And we love that. At least I hope so. And then we also went over the benchmarks and enforcing security. But then in self-service, we also show how you can provide that to your end users and show the value that you are supplying. And then we also went over self-service, providing them with a pre-approved catalog. And then user prompting, where there's pretty much no limits behind it. It's all on how much you adopt it. So, yeah, I guess we have 3 minutes for questions.
Yeah, and I crossed off the giveaway because we made the slide before we gave them away at once.
Yeah, talk about, that was shameful.
I know.
Anyone who attended that was embarrassing. Like no one showed up to that. Well, at least the name's selected. But who has a question?
Question concerning software updates. I do it still mainly manually. We talked about it. I do cache cleaning beforehand. I had bad experiences with, well, not very well maintained machines, let's say so. Sure. And doing the update then even like it caused even more problems, yeah. So before I do that, I'll have a. Is it possible now with these, before you start, like a pre-script or some tools which you guys even have, yeah, which cleans the kernel cache, for instance, or some.
Okay, so you're talking on device, not like a caching server.
Yeah, no,
Gotcha.
no caching. So on the device locally, yeah.
I mean, in theory, you could find a script. You could write a script that would look for when the declaration comes down to the device. You could do a log stream and monitor that and have like an agent that would go and do it, but we don't actually clear that out. That's kind of, so sidebar, I know we had kind of talked about like MDM Watchdog for versions prior to 14.4. There was some cleanup around that,
yes,
but without the kickstart, not so much. I will say with declarative, it's much better at trying again and clearing that out, because software update daemons on a newer version, and there's been a lot more reliability around that. So it hopefully solves for that problem. Yeah, the future is bright. I am trying to be nothing if not positive, because this time last year it was not the case.
Okay, we have 1 minute left. Any other quick questions? No? Alrighty. Well, if you think of any, we have a booth down there. Come visit us. Or you can always email us at product@Addigy, or in the app. Like, just look for our contact information. That works too. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.